Hello everyone, what's up and welcome back to another video. Today I will be doing my November wrap up. No, you're not imagining it. I didn't do wrap ups for July until October, but I will rapid fire rate them later on in this month. It's just that I don't have the energy to sit for 2 hours and rate books, and I don't think you're interested. So I think the 14 books that I read this month was enough for everyone to review. We're going to review the 14 books I read last month, and we're going to move on with our lives. This is a gap in my YouTube that nobody needs to see. Okay, and for those of you who recorded, you would know that wrap-ups are really not fun. So I think for next year, I might do them every quarter. Before we get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment down below how many books you've read in November. And let's just jump right into the video. The first book I read for November was Black Rose by Karina Halley, and this is the second book in the Dracula duet. And this follows a witch who is destined to kill Dracula because she was sent out by the Witches Guild to actually end his life because of things that he has done in the past, as well as some things that he is involved with in the present day. This takes place in, I think, Venice. I might be wrong. You know, it's been a month. We slowly start to follow the character as she falls in love with Dracula, even though he goes by another name. And this basically, the second book just essentially kicks off where the first book ended. Because of spoilers, I don't want to say a lot, but yeah, it really was a fun book to read. It was an easy book to read. Karina Halley always has this easy writing style that you can just quickly fall in love with. Yes, there are some things that irked me in this book, like the way Dracula treated the female character, especially in the second book. In the first book, he was very lovable towards her, but in the second book, it was really, you know, that point where in the Vampire Diaries where Klaus screams to Stefan, "Turn it off!" This is basically the vibes that Dracula gave, and it irked me. For Stefan's point of view, I could understand, but for Dracula, he was just being melodramatic and sappy. That's all he was doing. So I think for that reason, I gave it 4 stars, but still really enjoyable, still a really cute dark romance. I don't know if that can be classified as such, but yeah. If you haven't picked up Karina Halley's books, I really would suggest it. Guess I'm looking at you, bestie. The second book that I read was Where the Library Hides, which is again the second book and the last book basically in the Secrets of the Nile duology. In this duology, we basically follow Inez as she travels through Egypt after both her parents have unfortunately died. And she's trying to not only to come to terms with the fact that they are no longer with her, but she's trying to solve their murder cases and figure out why exactly they were killed. And while she does this, she also comes across one of her uncle's associates, who is a disgraced English soldier, and you know, they kind of start getting feelings for one another, but Wit has obviously ulterior motives. Obviously, because it's a duology, the story just takes off where it left in the previous story. I really enjoyed the first book. I actually loved the first book, could not talk about it, and I desperately wanted to get an art copy of Where the Library Hides, and luckily I got it over on NetGalley, so I read it and also loved that, and I also gave it 5 stars. The ending was just so good. It was a very decent ending towards duology. I mean, there's nothing that was left unsaid. There was nothing that I was like, okay, but what about these characters and what about these characters? The next book I read was Goldfinch by Raven Kennedy. This is the last book in the Place of Prisoner series, and yay that I finally finished the series. I believe Goldfinch came out like a few months ago, so you know, I'm not gonna make it too spoilery because I know a lot of people still need to read it. But essentially, this just follows a golden touched skinned girl named Orin, and she is basically fighting for her life in a royal setting. It is a King Midas retelling. I didn't find anything overly wrong with this book, except for the ending and the fact that the wars took place in 2 different areas, because I don't want to give a lot away, so I'm just putting it out there that I thought the 2 wars were going to come together and they didn't, and the ending kind of left it unsatisfactory. I see Raven Kennedy did post on her Instagram that the story for these characters might develop further, but there's no contract for her to continue these stories. But if there's no contract, I feel like, you know, we could have had like a little bit of a happier ending. Not that the ending's not happy, just certain things were left unclear. And I think for that reason alone, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I might bump it down to 4 because the more I sit and think about it, the more I'm like, it wasn't the greatest. I love the first 3 books, but the rest of the books, it didn't focus a lot on Oren. It focused more on the rest of the characters, and I was just like, I thought this was her book, you know. And the conflict resolution also just cleared up like that, which was yay, I guess. So I just wanted more. And I think for that reason, I'm giving it 4 stars. Then I read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. And this is a hockey romance based in the Maple Hills College area. I don't know if that place is even real. But we essentially follow Nathan and Anastasia, or Anastasia. I can't remember how to pronounce her name. But they have to share an ice skating rink because the hockey player's ice skating rink was like damaged or vandalized. That is the word I was looking for. And throughout all of this, Anastasia, or Stasi, she tries to keep Nathan at like a arm's length because she's not really the commitment type. She has situationships or she has one-night stands, but she never really has a relationship with a person. And Nathan is trying to break that barrier because he really wants to be with her. He really likes her. It's just them trying to figure out their relationship while there's turmoil in her friendship relationship, and there's also turmoil with him and his family. I really enjoyed this book. I can see why a lot of people complain and say it's insta-lovey, but it was basically the book right time, right read, if that even makes sense. Like, I read this at the right time because I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the characters, the growth that they went through. I think this book would be great if you in a mood for romance, but a sporty romance, and if you want to, you know, just have a palate cleanser. It is not highly focused on the sport. It is more focused on the relationships. So if you're going in with the idea that there needs to be a lot more sport, there isn't. Then I read Circus of the Damned by Laurel K. Hamilton. This is a long-standing series that I'm trying to get through by Laurel K. Hamilton. It is an urban fantasy series, and it's basically about a vampire hunter / animator, Anita Blake. And in this book, she is being like coaxed into becoming the master vampire of the city's slave while also being hunted down by other vampires. And she's trying to distance herself from the master vampire because she doesn't really want to be his human slave. But at the same time, this also puts her life in danger, and because she doesn't want to be his slave, this puts his authority in question amongst the other vampires. So there's kind of like a coup happening among the vampires, and it is pulling in all the humans in this situation as well. And this just unfolds into a very big, I won't say war, but just like a very big catastrophe that's about to happen. I really love this book, as I think I've loved all the books before this as well. I gave it 4 stars, really enjoyed it. It didn't give me that 5-star feeling where I was like, okay, I'm going to be sitting and thinking about this book forever, but it's been a few weeks and I'm still thinking about that book. I'm still thinking about the plot, so maybe, just maybe, I should bump it up to 5. It was a book I read during a bit of a turmoil week in my life, and I just got sucked into that book so badly that I think I'm gonna bump it up to a 5 because it was so far a very good book. I don't know why I'm throwing this out there, but just know it's between a 4 and a 5 stars for me. The next book was an ARC I received from the author and a book tasters over on Instagram, and it is Dastria by Madhurika Sankar. This book is a multiple POV fantasy story about a liquid substance that has basically changed the world in which these characters live in, and there's a war brewing between the immortals, some of them which are vying for power and others who are vying for love. This book basically just follows a few characters, how they traverse through the things that have happened to them due to this substance abuse, and you know, just how they can right their wrongs or just essentially change their future. I really liked the first part of this book. It was really intriguing to read it. Everything just seemed to flow really well. There were like unanswered questions and things that you're like, okay, what's gonna happen now? And then the second and the third part was just a disaster, to say it very lightly. Unfortunately, and I see a lot of reviews say the same, that I think the magic system got lost in the plot. And not only that, is the relationship between the characters felt forced. Obviously, I can see that the writer of this book knew their characters and they knew where they wanted the characters to go, but there was a lot of telling us about these characters and not a lot of showing. And I just felt like the plot somewhere along the line fell flat for me. It felt like this book was trying to be so condensed into one book where it could have easily been 2 or 3 books. All I can say is with a lot of execution and a lot more editing, a lot more refining, I think this book would have been a good book. It's just that as it is now, I didn't enjoy it a lot. So I gave it a very low 3 stars. Then the next book I read was 1984 by George Orwell. This is the darling of the dystopian classics. It is also heavily inspired Susan Collins to write the Hunger Games series. So in this book, we follow Winston Smith in true dystopian fashion, where he questions the government, what the government is actually planning on doing. He's also in that position where he works for government, so he sees the effects the government has on the general population and how they kind of brainwash the population. And slowly but surely, Winston stands against the government to try and fight, like this oppressing big brother, we can see everything that you do. Although I enjoyed the aspect of thinking, okay, this book is going to fight the government, it's like I want to see Hunger Games vibes from this. There's a lot of things in this book that just irked me. First of all was the love interest between him and Julie. He hated her for the first part of the book, and then the next part he suddenly loves her. So I feel like the relationship could have been refined more, and I know the relationship is not like the top priority of this book. It reads like it was written by a man. Basically, like the relationship was there, just for convenience sake. And I didn't enjoy that aspect of it. Julie is also, she was a really, I won't say gullible character, but she only saw the wrong things if it affected her. If it didn't affect her, she didn't care. She's still very young. I think she is 12 years younger than Winston was. And you can see the age difference between those two. It just, I don't know, both of them just irked me the wrong way. And then the ending was so unsatisfactory. I couldn't deal with it. From a English literature point of view, I can see where the ending comes from, and I won't bore you with the details or anything because it also spoils everything if I talk about the ending now. But I don't know, I was looking more for Hunger Games-esque vibes, and I didn't get those vibes. I got brainwashed vibes, and that's where it ended. So, I hope that keeps it still vague. So I gave this 2 stars. Unfortunately, I really wanted to love this, but yeah, it just didn't do it for me. I also read Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I'm very sketchy on classifying this book because a lot of people say it's dystopian, but it's also giving me steampunk vibes, So I don't know where this book falls. But in this book, we follow Mayor Borrow as she's trying to save her family from poverty. And she steals for a living just so that she can keep everything, working at the house. She also has a younger sister that still stays with her, but her younger sister is very good with needlework. And then one day, things happen that results in her sister being unable to do any more needlework. And now she has to stay home, and Mayor Borrow has to find a different way of trying to get money for the family so that they can survive, all while she is trying to protect her friend from being conscripted for the war. And she's also slowly following in his footsteps until she meets a very mysterious guy one night at a pub that she tries to rob. And instead of handing her over to the authorities, he decides that he's going to give her a work at the palace so that she won't be conscripted. But things escalate from there because Mayor Borrow is secretly hiding something from the kings and queens, something that she didn't even know about, but that puts her life at great risk. And the book basically just kicks off from there. I read this book, I think last year. I started it after reading Cruel Crown, and about 80 pages in, I was like, I'm not really vibing with the story. There's a lot of woe is me feelings, and everything is just so bad, and I cannot deal with it. Because it was a book club pick for November, I decided, okay, let me give it another try, and I listened to it on audio. Much better, because with audio, if you get secondhand embarrassment, you can just continue. But I have this thing where I get secondhand embarrassment and I just put the book down and I'm like, okay, maybe that's a later issue. But I'm so glad I continued with this book because it was just an enjoyable read. Obviously, I can see the influence that this had on Powerless. It does have the Powerless vibe. So if you like Powerless, I'm sure you'll like this book as well. If you haven't read this book, obviously, because I know a lot of people read Red Queen before they read Powerless. It kind of gives off the same vibes, just, I don't know, a bit more techie. I don't know if that even makes sense. But yeah, I did enjoy it, gave it 5 stars. Then I read the third book in the Zodiac Academy series, which is called The Reckoning, where we follow twins Tori and Vega as they try to navigate their way through Zodiac Academy. They were changelings when they were younger, so now they are in the Fae world and they are very powerful Faes, but they don't know it. Well, they do know it, but the problem is that there's a lot of attention on them, which they don't want. And secondly, they are being accused of fighting for a throne that they don't actually want. So in the third book, we just basically follow them continuously through this academy where they still learn more magic and more things happening. Although it is a bully romance, so if you don't like obsessive bullying towards characters, I would suggest not picking this book up because it irked me in the first book. Like, I really couldn't stand it. But I did enjoy this book. It was slow. The build-up is always slow, I figured, in these books, and then the plot twist comes and you're just like, oh, hold on, now we need to know more. So I see how the authors are trying to continuously keep the people engaged. My bestie and I hashed this out because we also buddy read this, and Tori and Darcy just need to figure themselves out. It's been 3 books, it's been a few weeks, get over yourself, kind of thing. And I think that's the only thing that irked me, as well as the heirs as well. They are very petty. Like, they want them, but they don't want them. Then they want them, then they don't want them. And I'm just like, choose a side, please, because this is getting annoying. I did like the relationship between Darcy and Orion. Like, you can see they are slowly starting to grow and trust one another. But I think after this book, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to go back to how it was. And it's getting exhausting, but I'm also intrigued to see where the plot is going, you know? And I gave this book 4 stars. Then I read Only a Monster, which was a buddy read with Donna and Manda. I mentioned them quite a lot in some of my vlogs. They also host the Readathon. This is a young adult story about 2 monsters who have been forced together to try and survive, as well as try and save their family from being executed by this monster hunter, and how they just travel through time basically to try and save this family. It does seem like it's a love triangle, although it wasn't really ironed out until like the end. I don't have a lot to say about this book because it's YA, and I feel like I'm slowly starting to outgrow YA. It might not have been for me, but I did give it 3 stars because I enjoyed the premise of it. I enjoyed the idea behind it. I just feel like if this was more of a new adult story, I would have been like, okay, I can get behind some of these characters. But most of the time, the main character just annoyed me with the things that she wanted to do, even though she was told, you cannot be doing that. And then she was like, watch me. And then I was just like, okay, you know, you do you because that's how you are supposed to be, but still, it's annoying. Then I read an Afrikaans book called Die Fantastische Mevrou not Smith. And this is basically just a cozy murder mystery happening in a small town in the Western Cape called Arendspoort. And she bought this house in this area because she's running from someone. And when she walks into this house after being detained for a night because she was arrested for reckless and negligent driving as well as drunk driving, she walks into her kitchen and she's like, oh, there's a dead person on my floor. So basically this is her just following a journey of making enemies in this town because she calls a spade, as well as trying to solve this murder. The problem I had with this book is there were 3 main plots focused in this book, and I couldn't get behind it. I felt like we were like, okay, can we focus on one thing, please? That's it. If we focus on the one murder and maybe bring in like a past thing that happened that can link the murder, fine. That would have been fine because in the end it links together. But now we had another, it's kind of more like a mystery than a murder that happened, and I was just like, I don't really care. The writing was also a bit off for me. I don't know what it was. It could have been because it's an Afrikaans book and I need to get used to the Afrikaans writing, but yeah, I struggled with the writing style in this. It threw me off for a loop there for a second. There's also a ghost in the story. I didn't think we were dealing with fantasy murder mystery or, you know, that kind of thing, or magical murder mystery. I thought it was just a murder mystery. And then you sprinkle in a ghost in there that talks to the main character, and I was just like, what is happening? Anyway, so yeah, also gave this book 3 stars. It wasn't a very good month for me, so I've come to realize. The next book or graphic novel I read was Die Volume 3. So this is about a group of kids that played a game that kind of resembles Dungeons and Dragons, but the problem is that the die transported them into another world. They were declared missing, and I think 10-15 years later they showed up. Each of them had like different PTSD type of things that happened to them. One of the characters has a missing arm, and to top it all off, one of the characters that went in with them never came out. And now 20 years later we follow the characters as they are sucked back into the game, trying to save their friend even though they didn't want to. And it's like this push and pull between the characters, because some want to go home because they have lives of their own, but others don't. They enjoy the world there because of things that are happening in their real life that they're like, okay, I want to stay in this part of the world because I might not die, but in the real life I might. It's an entertaining graphic novel. I also love the art in this. I'll put up pictures here if you want to see it. Just put it the whole screen for. I just love the art, and yeah, I can't get enough of this. I don't know what I'm going to read. Probably more of this author's work once I finish with Die, because I plan on finishing it next year. So 4 stars because things obviously develop more and things still don't always make sense to me, because they bring in like old, I won't say storytellers, but like old authors. It is also heavily focused on authors in the past, like Emily Bronte is in here, and I can't remember who else. It's confusing, but it's also entertaining. So, the second last book I read was Dark Fae, which is a companion novel to the Zodiac Academy, but this follows characters 4 years before the Zodiac Academy incidents in another academy. I think it's the Aurora Academy. I might be wrong. But this is basically a murder mystery that is happening. A character who is a vampire, she is trying to find out who killed her brother, and she has narrowed it down to 4 of the most prominent guys in this academy. The problem is she has to get close to them, but not too close, because 2 of them are like in warring clans. So if she chooses a side, obviously she won't be able to get closer to the other one. So she keeps toying with them, all 4 of them, not just 2 of them, all 4 of them. It's still in the early developments of the story as well. Again, everything moves slow, so slow, until you get to the end and it's just plot. And I gave this book 4 stars. The last book that I read was Spellbound by Kelly Armstrong. Yes, I finally made it. I finally read this book. Why did I wait so long? That's all I want to ask, is why did I wait so long? This book follows Savannah Levine, who is a private investigator as well as a witch / sorcerer. She is just that powerful. She is just that one. And she is trying to get back something that was stolen from her, because I don't want to give spoilers away. Anyway, it's just her trying to solve this query of who took it from her, and just overall mystery around everything as well. There's also like an organization who is trying to reveal supernaturals to the real world. Everyone who Savannah has encountered, like the older generation of the supernaturals, are like, you have no idea how dangerous this is, but at the same time she can understand why the younger generation wants to do it. I'm just going to talk over that dog because I cannot wait any longer, and I'm so sorry if it annoys you, because it's annoying me. Okay, so we just follow her and how she and a few of other supernaturals are trying to find this organization and trying to stop them from making a big mistake. But the ending of this also ends on a cliffhanger, so that was a wild time for me. And there's also something that happened between some of the characters that I was like, yes! I don't know, I'm always giddy when some of the characters pop up, but there's one character in particular. He can do no wrong in my eyes, I'm sorry. And I think I've said this before in some of the vlogs that I read about him. He's just so sweet. It's a southern sweetie, and I think you know who I'm talking about if you're familiar with the series. If not, I don't know, read the series. I think when I finish with 13 and when I finish with all the novellas, I'm restarting the series because I need to. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite, and I don't want the ending to like affect or change my rating. I want to stay true to the rating. So Savannah still reads young because she's only 21. She still does stuff that I'm like, okay, I can see you're very young And I won't say inexperienced, but one of the characters continuously tells her, go to Miami, go back to this place so that we can be safe. And then she's like, no, I have to save this person. And then that ends up, you know, like putting her life in danger because she just doesn't want to listen. And in the end, this kind of puts a damper in her relationship with this person. You just see how she struggles with the fact that she needs to mature, but because she's 21, because she's always been this hard-headed kind of person, it is very difficult for her to make that decision. I enjoyed the series. Like, I'm not even done yet, but I really enjoyed the series. So 13 is next, which will only probably be next year, but that's fine. I hope you guys enjoyed this vlog, this video. Okay, bye.